Why? Is it because the Russians fought the Great Patriotic War and the number of people that they lost? So it's grounded in their experience. And the way
Sure.
that it's grounded
There's
in
also
what
the fact that they've come out the other side of a an ideology that also preached their that needed to be spread to the rest of the world. They've been disillusioned of those ideological. In different terms, China has moved beyond the ideological constraints of a communist system whose tatters they still, clothe themselves in, even if in reality it's not there, right? China is only it only has the tatters of a communist state. It is not. It is a realist based nationalist Chinese state, that is more than anything at the end of the day, if we have to talk in moral terms, driven by ancient Chinese civilizational Confucian values, because it's written into their DNA. And to a certain extent, it always was.
Yeah, that is not the way we experience the world. I mean, I can tell you I live here, right? Even the way that the media reports it, they report it in the context of with freedom and justice, Superman being our icon, right? We may have excesses, but those excesses don't besmirch us morally. What we do is morally correct. And we're the good guys. That is the way we talk about it. That's the way it's discussed. That's the way it's reflected back to us, even though we do horrible things. So it's like a country can say
for good purpose. At the end of the day, it's for the greater good.
That's what they say. But when you get Madeleine Albright on TV and they point out, hey, you guys have basically killed 500,000 babies. Is that okay? And she says, yeah, I think it's for the best.
Without hesitation, before or after that statement.
That's astonishing.
Right? That was an illusion-shattering moment of the nature of this beast. Yes.
But it wasn't, which is my point.
Oh, it was for us. It wasn't for them. It was for us. It was for you. It was for me. It was for most of the people out there watching this, right? Who know what we're talking about. But that moment was, yes, the mask, the creature under the mask was revealed.
Yeah, that was an astonishing moment. I put it that way. That was an astonishing moment. That was very honest of her. Without any consequences for doing so, and consequences for saying that. And I guess that's the thing that terrifies me. I think you're right. I think it's kind of the Hitlerian ideology, right? Where it's the triumph of the will. Yeah, we don't have the material resources in order to do this, but we'll figure it out. And you get
there was a statement in the first George Bush administration that was attributed to Karl Rove about the nature of reality. We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality judiciously, as you will, we'll act again, creating other new realities, which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history's actors, destiny. And all of you, will be left to just study what we do. That's where they're playing from.
Yeah, but that doesn't work in practice. I always say reality asserts itself. It's kind of like when this war started. And I would say, Ukraine is losing. This looks bad. And the Western media would be like, Kursk was fantastic. This shows Zelensky still has it in him. And I would point out, reality would assert itself. It always does. It doesn't care about your beliefs. It doesn't care about...
It doesn't, though. While the dollar is the U.S. global reserve currency, that reality does not assert itself. Right? The U.S., at the end of the day, has not lost much in this conflict. Yes, their Pentagon stockpiles are down precarious low, particularly in air defense missiles, but that's actually the result of several different conflicts. But they have not paid a price. Even Europeans have only seen, shall we say, a marginal lowering of their standard of living. They have not suffered in this conflict yet. And until they do suffer, reality will not assert itself because it has not been brought home to them, right? To remember the way that the New York Times spoke of Ukraine flying drones into Russian business skyscrapers in Moscow City, right? 2 years ago, they spoke of it in approving terms as Ukrainian, despite the fact that these were obviously not in any way stretch of the imagination military targets, because it was Ukraine bringing the war home to Russians. Well, until the war is brought home to Americans and Europeans, that reality will and has not and will not reassert itself.
But if you're
and
right,
by then it will probably be too late, because then we'll be in the nuclear game.
it's that part. That's what I'm saying. If you're right, it will assert itself.
Yep.
Meaning there will be.
It'll be too late, though. At that point, it'll be too late.
I'm just saying it will. I'm not saying about where time frame. I'm just saying it will. I mean, at some point, they will be disabused of this idea of Western supremacy and all this other nonsense.
I'm sure you've read the reports that they now intend to put intermediate range, strategic capable missiles in Europe, right? Germany intends to buy, right? The Typhon system that will allow nuclear tipped Tomahawks to be launched deep into Russia from German territory. And Russia, according to some reports, unconfirmed, that one of the reasons why the U.S. is now getting so excited about Venezuela is that Russia is planning on countering that by putting Oreshniks in Venezuela. Now, I can't confirm. But I mean, I'm sure you see we're in a Cuban Missile Crisis, playover there, right?
But you need that. Look, I know people are going to say, "Whoa, what do you mean? You need that? You need leverage." Like, there's no way. The U.S. believes it's untouchable. There's a line in what is his name? The Three-Body Problem book, where one of the scientists points out, he says, "I always believe that there will be somebody at the table that's untouched." He said, "I got that wrong. Everybody's going to be touched by this." The U.S. believes it's untouchable. They believe, as you pointed out, with this division of labor, that they can feed the Europeans to the Russians. That's what they believe. In our DNA, we believe it. We believe that Europe is just Ukraine in expanse. What happens when that's not true? Now, I guess the terrifying part of this is you ended up with somebody like Donald Trump at the helm as opposed to JFK. But otherwise, how do you gain leverage? How do you make it clear you will be touched?
Why is that terrifying? Because if Trump was JFK, he really would be dead now.
Mark, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Having somebody with competence as opposed to somebody without is a very big deal. Those things are different. JFK, who made the speech, said we need to understand the Russians. We need to understand where they're coming from. We need to understand that 80% of the Nazis
killed him for it. And they
killed him for it, but he did it, is my point. He was competent in a way that we haven't had a competent leader in a very long time. These people are ideologues, as you point out. That's a terrifying reality that we're stuck with. What am I getting wrong? What am I getting wrong?
You're not. I'm simply pointing out that if there was such a person, they would kill him, right? Because it's the institutions, right? It's this whole. It's not just one person. It's not one secret cabal of transnational or Jewish, leaders pulling the puppet strings. It's not the Illuminati. It's not the Bilderberg group. It is something much harder and at the same time more prosaic and harder to understand. It is institutions where entire classes of people are ingrained with certain beliefs and worldviews. And that is the belief system, that exceptionalism, right? That foreign policy aspects of that exceptionalism that is DNA coded into the blob, into the US foreign policy and security. You can say the elite, but really it's the entire establishment, right?
Yeah.
From root to branch. And
Well,
it's just, you can't uproot that. You can't. I mean, the only thing that can uproot that is things like, a decades long occupation of Japan and Germany, right? I mean, that is, that type of military defeat and subjugation, right? Or maybe Great Depression style mass economic suffering and deprivation across a country that could lead to serious political changes. It is only, these type of shocks, right? If we're talking in, Naomi Klein's terms of the shock doctrine, it is only at those times that radical changes of the institutional political situation become possible.
are we currently in the
Milton
beginnings of
Friedman.
World War III?
Oh yeah, yeah. We probably have been since 2008.
Why 2008?
Because that's the August War. That's the war. That's the Georgia War, right? Because what happened in Georgia was just a rehearsal, right, for what's happening here, right? Because NATO said we're going to bring Georgia and Ukraine into NATO, right? Putin warned in his 2007 Munich speech, famous, don't do this, don't go down that road. In 2008, they did. They had their neoliberal strongman coming to power in Georgia on the color revolution, on the Rose Revolution, and they went for broke, and Russia stopped them cold in Georgia. And Georgia was a much smaller country, and it was over in a matter of days. And they didn't have the ability, they didn't share a European border with Georgia that they could flood the country with weapons and money and everything. It was just too far from their geopolitical hold in the South Caucasus at the time. So, but that is when it started, right? Everything. Then we had the war in Syria. We had the war in Libya. And now we have, since 2014, the replay, the Orange Revolution didn't rewrite the Ukrainian DNA. So they needed the Maidan to make sure that the results of their geopolitical flipping of Ukraine weren't just reversed, right? They had to lustrate and pogrom and ban all of the political opposition, meaning all of the political voice of East Ukraine, needed to be excised so that in the next election it just wouldn't have been reversed again as it was after the Orange Revolution, right? They needed to hardwire that into the new, anti-Russian, pro-Western Ukraine. They had to make sure that there couldn't be a political revisiting of the Maidan Putsch, and they did. And Russia stood by, hoping that there would be a political settlement with the West, the Minsk agreements, and he has since admitted that was my biggest mistake.
I'm curious on something. When the last defensive line falls, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and whatever line they come up with that is going to fall apart pretty quickly. I don't think they even have the time to do it, frankly. But okay, whatever that line is, what happens?
Then they simply continue. They will already prepare to set up a proxy government, a shadow government first, maybe in Lvov. If not in Lvov, then in Poland or Brussels or New York or what's it? Nova, Northern Virginia, right, somewhere there they will set it up, right? And we know all of this because before Russia even intervened, as the New York Times and the Washington Post reported, they were training Ukrainian special forces for a guerrilla war, right? They were preparing for what comes after this before this started.
I guess what I'm getting at is the Russian military just keeps going. Because governments in exile don't matter in real terms. I mean, that's not like facts on the ground issues. I guess what I'm getting at is that last defensive line falls. The Russian military pours into the rest of Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't have a defensive line to stop them.
Okay. So I'm not so sure the analogy of water pouring in is correct, because, again, it's in military terms, sure, right? But remember that occupying Ukraine is a very big country. And to physically occupy all of Ukraine, every town, settlement, and so forth, Russia has enough troops on hand, right? The current system is enough to take the Donbass and probably everything up to the Dnieper River. Probably. But if you're thinking Odessa and Kiev and, God forbid, West Ukraine beyond that, then that is not going to be enough. Russia's going to have to call up its reservists, right? It's got a pool of 2 million reservists, right, that it can call on. It won't have to go to the civilian population until the final war really starts with Europe. But that will still have all kinds of political and economic costs. And Russia won't want to do it. The Kremlin doesn't want to do it. The Kremlin desperately hopes that they can force a political settlement on the West, that they will cut their losses, and they will not do it. They will not accept it. It's not going to happen. They'll force Russia to choke itself on all of Ukraine, to overextend itself, right? It's baked into the papers. You know, you've read them, Rand Corporation as well. There's the inevitable geopolitical, the strategic logic of this has been worked out a decade in advance, right? I don't know if you've read or watched The Foundation, right? Yeah, it's like psychohistory. You can see the possible pathways, right? It's not quite that old, but that power of prognostication on that level. But all of this has been planned out before, and we're just playing through a script now.
What happens to Zelensky? I always say he's a man with no future.
Who cares? True? Who cares?
Actor played his role. He cleared the stage.
Yep.
Does he know he's playing a role?
I mean, what happened to Juan Guaido? What happened to him?
Who's that?
Yeah, who's that? When's the last time you heard from Svetlana Tikhanovskaya? Or, for that matter, what happened to Bashar al-Assad?
All of these people, or let's say all of these articles in the West are talking about Zelensky taking over, saying that they want a political change. Zelensky is their guy. Now, I got to be honest with you. I don't know the difference between the two. Short of...
I do.
What's the difference?
The difference is that Zelensky is a committed ideological banderite.
And you don't think Zelensky is?
I think he wasn't, like Poroshenko. He was someone else who then was forced to internalize, right, the ideological and far right underpinnings of the regime that he inherited. Right, he has since internalized it, but he wasn't that way when he began. I mean, there's plenty of videos out there of him talking about how ridiculous the Banderites were, how East Ukrainians should be able to speak Russian, how Russians and Ukrainians could never go to war because we're the same people, right? You know, he said all of that at one point, and then obviously, he internalized all of this because he became the head of the institutions, right? And he was forced to do so at some level. And now I just think he's mad. I mean, I don't think, I mean, his own people have told Time Magazine they think he's delusional, right? That he's the emperor with no clothes. I think at this point he's been broken by ideologically, mentally, emotionally. He's broken. So that's why I say it really doesn't matter. But Zelensky, no, man, that guy had 2 busts of Stepan Bandera in his military office. Not just 1, 2, because 1 bust of Stepan Bandera is not enough. Another of Roman Shukovich, and the big black, red, and black Banderite banner spread across the whole back wall of his military office. Don't tell me things will be any better or there'll be any diplomatic settlement with that guy at the helm. Right?
Well,
he is chilling in veritable political exile from Zelensky, at least in London, commenting how Russia can be defeated with an army of robots. I mean, that is, high tech. That is where, he's not talking peace. He's not talking hard concessions. No, he's talking the army of robots and underground boring machines that will defeat Russia, right?
One of the Azov members did an interview, and he pointed out, he says, look, even if we had 100,000 men, it wouldn't make a difference. There was another interview that took place, I think it was in the Times magazine, where the guy was like, the Russians are trying to kill me. And he says, Zelensky knows that if he makes any deal or any concessions, it will be a betrayal, and they will string him up in a heartbeat.
They've said that repeatedly from the beginning. It's been said openly online. There's not really, I mean, the Western media can choose not to acknowledge that, because to acknowledge that would be acknowledging, the reality of who they've been backing in all of this. So they can never admit that. But yeah, it's been said plenty of times by enough of these top right-wing commanders.
Can't get his name out. If Zelensky, Valery, and Zelensky are effectively similar at this
point.
Valery, thank you. Zelensky. If they're so similar at this point in the way that they've internalized all of this, then what's the point of the change? Is it just a new person at the helm? Is it just to try to, they know Ukraine is against the war. At this point, you got like 69, 70% saying we want it to stop, even if you have to give up land. And so,
I mean, sometimes you just want to remake the same movie with a different person who's almost certainly going to be worse than the original, right? There's an impulse to that, right? Yeah. That's why you continually have in, domestic politics, you have this idea of a government reshuffle to put a few new faces in there, right, that are in charge of the same institutions. And, 2 years down the line, you'll see that absolutely nothing has changed, but, it provides for a degree of political PR reset.
Mark, I see the logic of your point of view. I hope you're wrong.
So do I.
I hope
so do I.
A corner that we turn. I hope there's a magical door. I don't see it right now, because I agree with you.
I've got a magical a magical wardrobe back there, and if I open it up and I go past the fur coats, I'll find myself in Narnia, right? I read that book as a kid too.
Life is weird. Sometimes there are corners we don't see, and hopefully there's a corner. I don't see it right now. I mean, I gotta be honest, I don't see a corner for a lot of things. I think the US is going to collapse at some point. I don't think you can run in contradictions forever and expect good outcomes.
I sincerely hope you're right there, that the US collapses at some point too, because that will be the only way, favorable to me that's out of this.
Yeah. Mark,
sorry for you, but I'm out of it.
Yeah, sucks for me, right? But we create chaos. It's just an agent of chaos. And you can look at any war around the globe, and there's a US element or contingent egging it as like an enzyme, egging it along. And there's this good question of, okay, would these countries or would these places act this way if the US wasn't involved? Look at Syria. Syria is a great example. I mean, they're trying to create political chaos in Lebanon while egging on Wahhabis and the Israelis to effectively attack Lebanon.
If
Okay, what
if
is
they
happening?
could get firm control of the entire state, they would. But yeah,
Yes.
chaos is an acceptable plan B because they're perfectly positioned to exploit it. Yeah, they're okay with that as a plan B.
I'm
Always.
saying that's all around the world.
Yes.
It's all around the world. Mark, you are fantastic. Thank you for this. Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. You can find Mark on Boosty, Boosty. If you put in Realpolitik with Mark Sleboda, or just put in Mark Sleboda, his name will come up. This is a droplet of his knowledge and information. Definitely check him out. I always say you're the best in the biz, Mark. And I mean it. I really do. Thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay?
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye. All right. Mark is fantastic. It's dark, but it's fantastic. I mean, it's hard to kind of quibble with the logic of